Step out of the light. Forget the comfort of the familiar. Because tonight, we're taking a detour down a road less traveled. A place where the shadows hold secrets and the silence is a lie. Welcome to the Nomad's Nook, a dark garage in Midnight Pass, where the rules aren't just for survival, they're for staying sane. My name is Jax Riley, and I thought I was running from my past, but this place is a beacon for everything you never wanted to find. This isn't just a story, it's a descent. So, tell me in the comments, what's the strangest thing you've ever encountered on a lonely road? And if you're ready to face the darkness with me, make sure to subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules and ring that bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this engine really runs. Prepare yourself for Chapter 1. The thump 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 from the headlights of the battered coupe wasn't mechanical. I spent enough years with grease under my fingernails and the roar of engines in my ears. First in Uncle Sam's motor pool, then later on tracks I no longer dared to name, to know the sound of a dying alternator or a faulty relay. This was different. This was rhythmic, sickeningly organic, like the last labored heartbeats of some wounded desert beast. And that's when I knew my second graveyard shift at this godforsaken roadside relic, optimistically named the Nomad's Nook, was already heading straight to hell in a handbasket. My name is Jax Riley, though most used to call me Wrench. That was before the failed Phoenix project, before the auditory disorientation tech went haywire, before the screams and the static that still clawed at the edges of my sleep. Now, I was just Jax, a man running from a past that echoed louder than any blown gasket, seeking anonymity in the vast, indifferent silence of the Arizona desert. Somewhere off a forgotten stretch of Route 666, the Nook, a ramshackle garage attached to an equally dilapidated saloon, felt about as off-grid as one could get. The coupe, a rust-bucket Pontiac from the 70s, had rolled silently into Bay 1 about 10 minutes ago, engine cold. No driver in sight. Just those pulsing headlights, painting ghastly, rhythmic shadows across the oil-stained concrete. Rule number 1. According to Sarah Moon, the Nook's enigmatic young proprietor, was already in play. Sarah was leaning against the chipped Formica counter of the saloon side, idly polishing a glass, her movements fluid and unhurried, despite the spectral light show in my bay. She was a wisp of a thing. Couldn't have been older than her mid-20s, with eyes the color of twilight, and a cascade of silver-black hair that seemed to drink the dim light. She'd hired me on the spot 2 days ago. No questions asked about the haunted look in my eyes, or the way I flinched at sudden loud noises. She just handed me a broom, a set of equally ancient tools, and the 3 rules. "Salt circle it is, Jax," she said now, her voice a low, melodic hum that barely carried over the distant howl of coyotes. "And remember, no touching. She's just passing through." I grunted, grabbing the coarse bag of rock salt from the shelf where she'd indicated. The air around the Pontiac was noticeably colder, carrying a faint metallic scent, like ozone and something else. Something vaguely like burnt sugar. I began an unsteady circle around the derelict car, the salt crunching under my boots. This was insane. I was a mechanic, a soldier, not some ghostbuster. But the desperation that had driven me to this remote corner of the desert was a powerful motivator to follow even the most bizarre instructions. From a shadowy corner of the saloon, a mournful guitar chordaged Kai Albescu, the Nook's resident, and probably only, musician, was hunched over his battered acoustic, his long dark hair obscuring his face. He was another enigma, a young man who drifted in a week before me, playing haunting folk tunes about phantom highways and lost souls in exchange for stale beer and a couch to crash on. He looked up as I finished the salt circle, his dark eyes more curious than alarmed. Those headlight pulses didn't seem to faze him, as if on cue, with the last grain of salt laid. The thump, thump, thump of the Pontiac's headlights softened, then ceased. The car sat in its salty corral, silent and inert. "She'll be gone by dawn," Sarah said, her voice still unnervingly calm. "Most of them are." "Most of them?" I just shook my head, retreating to the relative sanity of an oil change on a beat-up pickup truck in Bay 2. The rest of the early shift passed in a tense, watchful quiet. The Nook attracted a strange clientele: grizzled truckers with thousand-yard stares, lone wanderers with no discernible destination, couples who argued in hushed, angry tones. No one mentioned the car in Bay 1. It was as if it was invisible to them, or perhaps just another part of the Nook's peculiar landscape. As the first pale hint of dawn painted the eastern sky, I was wiping grease from my hands when I noticed it. Not physically, but its presence seemed to lessen, the shadows around it thinning. Then, with a soft, almost inaudible sigh, like air escaping old leather, it was simply gone. The salt circle remained, undisturbed, but on the dusty concrete where the car had stood, a faint, shimmering wisp, vaguely human-shaped, rose for a split second before dissipating into the still cool morning air. I stared, my mouth dry. Zara appeared at my elbow, a steaming mug of coffee in her hand. She followed my gaze to the empty bay. "Some passengers," she said, her twilight eyes holding a hint of a smile that didn't quite reach them. "Just need a quiet place to rest before continuing their journey." She handed me the coffee. "Welcome to the Nomad's Nook, Jax. Try not to let warmth static get to you." The coffee was bitter, but the warmth was welcome. Static. That was a word that resonated with me in ways she couldn't possibly know. Or perhaps she knew all too well. The rhythm of the Nomad's Nook, if you could call it that, settled in with an unnerving predictability. Days were for fitful, nightmare-ridden sleep in the cramped, musty room above the garage. Nights were for the hum of the desert wind, the occasional sputter of a dying engine, and the constant, low-level thrum of something, an energy, a frequency that vibrated just beneath the surface of the ordinary, making the hairs on my arms stand on end, and the shrapnel of my past, the disorienting pulses of the Phoenix Project, the screams lost in a cacophony of weaponized sound, echo with a fresh, painful clarity. Sierra Moon remained an enigma. She moved through the Nook like a phantom herself, her quiet efficiency and unnerving calm a stark contrast to the establishment's decaying facade. She rarely spoke of herself, or of the Nook's history, deflecting my cautious questions with vague pronouncements about the old ways of the road or the echoes travelers leave behind. Kai Albescu, the wandering musician, was a more talkative, if equally cryptic, companion. His guitar case was plastered with faded stickers from forgotten roadside attractions. His notebook filled with lyrics about ghost lights on lonely highways and deals made with unseen entities at desolate crossroads. He seemed to accept the Nook's peculiarities as just another verse in a long, strange song. The second rule was put to the test about a week into my tenure. A battered panel van, the kind favored by bands that never quite make it, or people with something to hide, was towed in late one night, its engine seized solid. The driver, a twitchy, hollow-eyed man, who paid in crumpled, damp dollar bills, and reeked of stale sweat and desperation, said little, only that he needed it running by morning, no matter what. After he'd shuffled off into the saloon side for a drink or 10, I got to work. The van's electrical system was a rat's nest of frayed wires and amateur fixes. As I was tracing a short, my hand brushed against the dashboard radio. It was an old aftermarket unit, its display dark. The van's battery was completely disconnected, lying on the workbench beside me. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life, not with music or even the usual hiss of an untuned station. It was pure, raw static, thick and roiling. And from within that white noise, a voice emerged. Or rather, voices, layered, distorted, and chillingly artificial. They whispered, sibilant and metallic, like a malfunctioning AI trying to mimic human speech. Jax. The sound scraped against my eardrums, triggering a cascade of unwanted memories. The disorienting sonic frequencies from the Phoenix Project. Why didn't we remix when the Phoenix Project? What? We hear you. Your resonance. It calls to us. Such interesting patterns. Interspersed with the whispers were high-pitched whines, low rumbles. The phantom echoes of the very weaponized soundscapes that had shattered my nerves and my career. My blood ran cold. My hands clenched into fists. This wasn't just a random radio fault. This was targeted. This knew me. Do not tune. Sierra's calm, insistent voice echoed in my memory clearer than the whispers from the dashboard. With a surge of revulsion and a primal fear I hadn't felt since the project, I grabbed a pair of wire cutters, and with a savage snip, severed the speaker wires leading to the radio. The whispers died instantly, leaving only the ringing in my own ears and the frantic thumping of my heart. I stood there, shaking, the cutters still in my hand. Kai, who had been silently nursing a beer at the saloon door, watching me, pushed himself off the frame. The Wavelength 0 man, he said softly, his dark eyes holding a strange understanding. Some old highways, they got their own broadcast. Not everyone can tune in, but those who can. He shrugged, a gesture that encompassed a world of unseen horrors. They say it remembers voices, especially the ones that scream. He strummed a dissonant chord on his guitar. Best not to answer when it calls your name. Later, a sleek dark sedan with government plates pulled into the Nook. The driver, a man in a nondescript suit who introduced himself as Mr. Silas, asked a lot of pointed questions. About me, about who owned the Nook, about any unusual transmissions or unexplained electromagnetic phenomena in the area. He had the cold, watchful eyes of a hunter. I played dumb, a greased monkey who just fixed cars. But as he drove away, I had the distinct, chilling feeling that the static wasn't the only thing that had found my frequency. My past was catching up, and the Nomad's Nook, I was beginning to realize, might be less of a refuge and more of a beacon. The whispers, even after I'd mutilated the Vaughn's radio, didn't entirely cease. They became more insidious, harder to pinpoint. Sometimes I'd hear my name sighed on the desert wind as it whistled through the cracks in the Nook's weathered walls. Other times, it would be a fleeting murmur from the ancient, buzzing neon sign above the garage door, or a distorted, almost subliminal echo in the static between songs on Kai's cheap portable radio. The Highway Hypnos, as Kai morbidly dubbed it, was a persistent, unwelcome companion. My nightmares intensified, evolving from the fragmented horrors of the Phoenix Project into something new, something intertwined with this desolate stretch of highway. I dreamt of driving endlessly down roads that didn't exist, the stars above cold and alien, a single flickering street lamp, the only landmark in an infinite void. I'd wake up, heart pounding, the scent of ozone and burnt sugar, the same scent from that first phantom coupe, clinging to me like a shroud. Sierra remained a beautiful, frustrating enigma. She offered no explanations, only those calm, cryptic smiles and the occasional unnervingly accurate observation about my restless energy or the shadows I carried. I started watching her more closely, her late-night rituals, the way she would sometimes stand at the edge of the highway, her face upturned to the star-dusted sky, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Was she a part of this? A cultist? A guardian? Or something else entirely? The third rule was triggered on a night of the whispers, even after I'd mutilated the Vaughn's radio, didn't entirely cease. They became more insidious, harder to pinpoint. Sometimes I'd hear my name sighed on the desert wind as it whistled through the cracks in the Nook's weathered walls. Other times, it would be a fleeting murmur from the ancient, buzzing neon sign above the garage door, or a distorted, almost subliminal echo in the static between songs on Kai's cheap portable radio. The Highway Hypnos, as Kai morbidly dubbed it, was a persistent, unwelcome companion. My nightmares intensified, evolving from the fragmented horrors of the Phoenix Project into something new, something intertwined with this desolate stretch of highway. I dreamt of driving endlessly down roads that didn't exist, the stars above cold and alien, a single flickering street lamp, the only landmark in an infinite void. I'd wake up, heart pounding, the scent of ozone and burnt sugar, the same scent from that first phantom coupe, clinging to me like a shroud. Sierra remained a beautiful, frustrating enigma. She offered no explanations, only those calm, cryptic smiles and the occasional unnervingly accurate observation about my restless energy or the shadows I carried. I started watching her more closely, her late-night rituals, the way she would sometimes stand at the edge of the highway, her face upturned to the star-dusted sky, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. Was she a part of this? A cultist? A guardian? Or something else entirely? The third rule was triggered on a night of oppressive, pre-storm stillness. The air was thick, heavy, the silence of the desert almost absolute, broken only by the frantic chirping of unseen insects. I was replacing a fuel pump on an old RV. The owner, a nervous, bird-like woman, who kept glancing out at the highway as if expecting a posse. I straightened up, wiping sweat from my brow, and glanced out of the massive, open garage doors. My blood turned to ice. The familiar ribbon of cracked asphalt, the faded white line parodied us into the darkness towards the distant, skeletal outline of Midnight Pass, was gone. In its place was an abyss, a vast, silent, star-strewn void, utterly black, yet pricked with a billion distant, uncaring pinpricks of light. And hanging in that impossible emptiness, perhaps 100 yards out, was a single, antique street lamp, its yellow light flickering erratically, casting a weak, lonely circle on nothing. There was no sound, no wind, just the profound, terrifying emptiness, and that solitary beckoning light. My breath hitched. Bile rose in my throat. This was my nightmare, made real. If the highway vanishes, finish your task in silence, then burn sage to call the road back. Sierra's voice, calm, precise. A lifeline in the sudden madness. Silence easier said than done when your universe has just unraveled. I forced myself to turn back to the RV, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold the wrench. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to yell, to do something. But Sarah's warning, and a deeper, colder fear of what might happen if I broke this particular rule, kept me rooted. I worked with a desperate, fumbling focus, the silence of the void pressing in, threatening to swallow me whole. The only sound was my own ragged breathing and the clink of metal on metal. The chirping of the insects had utterly ceased. It felt like an eternity, but finally, the fuel pump was secure. I practically threw the tools down and lurched towards the Nook's cramped, dusty office. Sierra, as always, was prepared. A thick bundle of dried sage lay on the scarred wooden desk, next to a box of matches. My hands were still shaking as I lit the sage. The pungent, aromatic smoke billowed out, thick and white, filling the small room, its earthy scent a stark contrast to the cold, sterile emptiness I'd just witnessed. I carried the smoldering sage to the garage doorway, wafting the smoke out towards the terrifying vista. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the starlit void before me seemed to ripple, like heat haze above asphalt, but 1,000 times more profound. The single street lamp flickered violently. Then, with a soft, implosive whoosh, it vanished. The stars swirled, contracted, and then, with a sickening lurch that made my stomach churn, the familiar, cracked asphalt of the highway snapped back into existence. The distant lights of midnight pass a reassuring. The incident with the vanishing highway marked a turning point. The fear was no longer a sfondo, a low hum in the background. It was a constant, jarring chord. My nightmares became cinematic, filled with impossible geometries, stardusted voids, and the seductive, terrifying flicker of that solitary street lamp. I'd wake up shouting, the scent of sage and ozone clinging to my sweat-soaked sheets. I started double-dosing on the cheap coffee Sarah brewed, just to stay on my feet, my nerves stretched as taut as a fan belt about to snap. I became obsessed with Sarah Moon. Who was she, really? This young woman who moved with an ancient calm, who spoke of phantom cars and vanishing highways as if they were mundane occurrences. Was she a prisoner here, like me? Or was she something far more integral to the Nook's strangeness? My military training, the part of me that analyzed threats and sought out vulnerabilities, took over. When Siren was occupied in the saloon, or on one of her infrequent, unexplained absences during the day, I began to subtly investigate. Her small office, tucked behind the bar, was usually locked. But one afternoon, I found it ajar. The room was Spartan, almost monastic, but for a large, antique wooden chest, and a workbench covered not with ledgers and invoices, but with strange, hand-drawn schematics. They went for car engines. They depicted complex, spiraling patterns, like galaxies or nautilus shells, interspersed with what looked like musical notation and equations referencing wave theory and resonant frequencies. There were notes in the margins, in Sarah's neat looping script, about harmonic convergence points, ley lines of the fourth dimension, and the optimal calibration for a receptive consciousness. My blood ran cold. This wasn't the office of a simple garage owner. This was the workshop of a conductor or a trapper. The nightmares, I realized, weren't just random. They were becoming more structured. The sensations from the Phoenix Project, the disorienting audio pulses, the feeling of my thoughts being unraveled by specific frequencies, were now woven into the fabric of these void-like dreamscapes. It felt like something or someone was probing me, testing my Anpassungsfähigkeit, my psychic defenses. Was Siren tuning me? The heartbeat cars, Rule 1, started appearing more frequently, their headlight pulses more erratic, more insistent. And each time, after they vanished at dawn, I felt a subtle shift in the Nook's atmosphere, a slight thickening of that unseen energy, as if something had been deposited or harvested. Sarah would collect the salt from the circles with a small silver scoop, her expression serene, almost reverent. One afternoon, I found what I'd been subconsciously dreading. Tucked beneath a loose floorboard in her office, I discovered a device. It was a complex assemblage of copper coils, quartz crystals, and antique vacuum tubes, all wired to a tarnished silver control panel, with dials calibrated to no known measurement. It was humming faintly, a low, almost inaudible thrum that resonated deep in my teeth, sickeningly familiar. It wasn't identical to the Phoenix Project tech, but the principles, the feel of it, were terrifyingly similar. It was a resonator. It was a resonator, or a transmitter, and it was active. That evening, Agent Thorne, Silas, cornered me as I was checking tire pressures. He dropped all pretense of casual inquiry. Riley, he said, his voice hard, his eyes like chips of ice. Let's cut the crap. I know who you are. Jax Riley, Exos Army, Phoenix Project. We've been tracking residual M signatures from that debacle for years. They led us here, to this garage, to her. He jerked his head towards the saloon, where Sarah was calmly wiping down the bar. Phoenix was shut down, I said, my voice a low growl. Classified. How do you? Some things don't stay buried, Riley, Thorne interrupted, especially when they involve stolen government tech and unnatural energy readings. We believe Seraphina Moon is not who she appears to be. We believe this Nomad's Nook is a front for something far more dangerous. Illicit energy experiments, unauthorized frequency manipulation, perhaps even contact with other intelligences. His gaze was intense. You're in over your head, but you might be useful. Tell me what you know about her setup, about these anomalies. Help us, and maybe we can help you with your outstanding obligations. A threat wrapped in a tentative offer. My past, the Nook's present, all converging. Was Sierra a rogue scientist? A government experiment gone wild, using this place as her lab? Or was Thorne the one who was truly in the dark, blundering into a reality far stranger than stolen tech? The decision was ripped from my hands. As Thorne spoke, the familiar thump-thump-thump of pulsing headlights echoed from Bay 1. But this time it was different, faster, more agitated, and it was accompanied by a sound that made every nerve in my body scream. The high-pitched, disorienting whine of the Phoenix Project's core frequency. A sound I thought I'd never hear again outside my own nightmares. Sarah appeared at the garage doorway, her usual calm replaced by a look of intense, almost feverish concentration. Her twilight eyes were fixed on the car in Bay 1, and then on me. Jax, she said, her voice a low, urgent hum, laced with an undeniable power. It's time. The highway is calling. And tonight you are the main frequency. The game, whatever it was, had just escalated beyond anything I could have imagined. And I was right in the goddamn middle of its deafening, terrifying static. The whine from the car in Bay 1. That accursed Phoenix Project frequency drilled into my skull. Each pulse a fresh wave of nausea and disorientation. The pulsing headlights of the Phantom Coupe. A different model this time, sleeker, more predatory, beat in time with the escalating throb in my temples. This wasn't just a passing through visitor. This felt like a summons, an overture to something terrible. What in God's name is that sound? Again Thorne hissed, his hand instinctively going to the gun holstered beneath his jacket, his professional composure momentarily cracking to reveal a raw, human fear. He, too, recognized that resonant signature, or at least its unnatural, invasive quality. Sarah Moon ignored him, her entire being focused on me, then on the car. Her usual serene demeanor was gone, replaced by a taut, almost ecstatic intensity. Her silver-black hair seemed to crackle with an unseen energy, her twilight eyes glowing with a faint internal luminescence. The pass is aligning, Jax, she said, her voice a low, resonant thrum that competed with the Phoenix whine, the celestial conjunction. Tonight, the Highway Hypnos sings its strongest song, and this, she gestured to the aggressively pulsing coupe, is its herald, the chrome lich, in its fullest glory. Before I could process that cryptic pronouncement, the Nook erupted into a cacophony of supernatural chaos. From the saloon side, Kyle Bescu let out a startled yell. The radio behind the bar, which had been playing a scratchy country tune, suddenly blasted a torrent of static, and through it, a chorus of metallic whispers, all chanting my name, each syllable distorted, laced with that same memory-triggering Phoenix frequency. Jax, Atun, Resonat, become, Ya. Simultaneously, The massive garage doors at the front of the Nook slammed shut with a deafening clang, as if by an unseen hand. As if by an unseen hand, I looked wildly towards the highway, or where the highway should have been. The familiar asphalt was gone, swallowed by that terrifying star-strewn void, the solitary flickering street lamp its only mocking beacon. But this time, the void felt closer, more immediate, and the street lamp seemed to pulse in time with the chrome licks headlights. Rule 1, Rule 2, Rule 3, all triggered, all runs, amplified to a terrifying crescendo. "Moon, what is this?" Thorn demanded, his gun now drawn, his face pale but determined. "Is this your doing?" "Some kind of sonic weapon test." Siren laughed, a sound that was both beautiful and utterly devoid of human warmth. "Weapon? Weapon? Oh, Agent Thorn, your imagination is so terrestrial." She turned her glowing eyes on him. "This is older than your government, older than your precious projects. This is the music of the liminal spaces, the resonance of the roads between worlds. And the Nomad's Nook," she spread her arms wide, "is not a mere garage, nor a humble saloon. It is an amplifier, a tuning fork. And tonight, Jax," her gaze locked onto mine again, "you are the conductor. What do you want from me?" I snarled, fighting the waves of disorientation, the old training kicking in, pushing past the fear. "Want?" She tilted her head. "I want to hear the full symphony, Jax. Your unique frequency, forged in the crucible of your government's little sound experiments, makes you the perfect antenna, the perfect amplifier for the hypnosis signal. With you, I can not only hear the whispers of the void, I can guide them, harvest them. For generations, my family, the true nomads, have been keepers of the past, guardians of these transitional frequencies. We maintain the balance, filter the echoes. Balance or control? Control? Thorn interjected, his gun still trained on her, though he looked utterly bewildered by the cosmic pronouncements. "A little of both," Siren admitted with a chilling smile. "But the balance has been disturbed. Too many dissonant signals from your world. Too much noise." She gestured to the device I'd found in her office, which now sat on the saloon bar, glowing faintly, its copper coils and quartz crystals vibrating. "This reliquary helps me filter, to harmonize. But it needs a catalyst, a human resonator of exceptional clarity. That, my dear wrench, is you." The chrome lick in Bay 1 revved an engine that wasn't there, its headlight pulses becoming blinding. The whispers from the static intensified, clawing at my sanity. The void outside seemed to press in, the lone street lamp beckoning. Kai Albescu staggered out from the saloon, his guitar clutched like a shield, his face ashen. "Zera, this is too much even for you. The frequencies, they're tearing things apart." He began to strum his guitar. Not a melody, but a series of dissonant, jarring chords, as if trying to create a counter-frequency. "Stay out of this, little songbird," Siren hissed, a flash of genuine anger in her eyes. "This is my birthright, my opus." Agent Thorn, seeing his opportunity, fired a shot, not at Siren, but at the strange device on the bar. A crystal shattered, a vacuum tube exploded, and the device let out a piercing shriek before falling silent. Siren screamed, a sound of pure rage and pain, as if she herself had been struck. The pulsing lights of the chrome lish faltered. The whispers from the static wavered. For a moment I thought Thorn had actually done it. But then the void outside surged. The lone street lamp blazed with an almost unbearable intensity, and a wave of crushing, silent pressure slammed into the Nook. The chrome lick's headlights exploded back to life, no longer pulsing, but blazing with a solid, malevolent white light. Its phantom engine roared, a sound that shook the very foundations of the garage. "Fool!" Sierra shrieked at Thorn, her face contorted. "You've broken the filter. You've unbalanced the signal. Now it will take what it wants. Unfiltered, uncontrolled." The chrome leak began to roll forward, not out of its salt circle, which now glowed with an angry protective light, but through it, the salt scattering like dust. It was heading for me. My military instincts screamed. This wasn't on or a debate. This was combat. My past, the Phoenix Project. It had almost destroyed me, but it had also taught me about frequencies, about resonance, about how to disrupt them. Zara's device was broken, but the Nook itself, she'd said, was an amplifier. "Kai!" I yelled over the din. "Those dissonant chords. Keep playing them. As loud as you can. Try to match the whine, then break it." "Thorn!" I shouted, grabbing a heavy crowbar. "That car. It's not just a car. It's a focal point. We need to disable it, but not destroy its core." I didn't know what that meant, but it felt right. The chrome lich was almost upon me, its blazing headlights searing my vision, the Phoenix whine reaching a fever pitch. I could feel my thoughts fragmenting, my memories twisting. The Highway Hypnos was trying to unravel me, to make me a part of its terrible static-laced song. Sierra, recovering from her rage, now looked terrified. "No, not like this. It will consume everything." She fumbled with the remnants of her device, trying to salvage something. Kai, his face a mask of concentration, began to play his guitar with a desperate fury. His chords a chaotic, clashing wall of sound that fought against the lick's oppressive frequency. Thorn, despite his obvious terror, stood his ground, firing shot after shot at the lick's engine block, the bullets sparking uselessly against its phantom metal. I had one chance. The salt circle was broken, but its residual energy, the concept of containment, still lingered. Sierra's device, though damaged, still held some of its original purpose. The Nook itself, it was all about resonance and counter-resonance. I scrambled towards the main circuit breaker for the garage, the one that powered the big neon sign, the buzzing coolers, everything. If the Nook was an amplifier, I had to change its frequency. Drastically, with a roar, I slammed the crowbar into the breaker box, shattering the cover, then hammered it down onto the main switch, forcing it off, then on, then off again, rapidly, erratically, creating a jarring, stuttering electrical pulse throughout the entire building. The lights in the Nook flickered and died, then surged, then died again. The buzzing neon sign outside let out a series of pops and cracks. The effect on the chrome lich was instantaneous and violent. Its blazing headlights stuttered, flickered, then exploded in a shower of spectral sparks. The Phoenix whine fractured, breaking into 1,000 discordant echoes before collapsing into an agonizing, metallic scream. The car itself seemed to shudder, its form becoming translucent. Then, with a final violent lurch, it dissolved into a plume of oily black smoke that smelled of burnt sugar and despair, before being sucked out towards the raging void where the highway used to be. The void itself seemed to recoil, the intense light of the solitary street lamp dimming. Then, with a sound like a vast cosmic exhalation, it too began to retreat. The stars swirled, the darkness folded in on itself, and with a final, cocked lurch that nearly sent us all sprawling, the familiar, cracked asphalt of the highway snapped back into place. Silence. Sarah Moon stared at the empty space where the chrome lich had been, then at the smoking remnants of her device, then at me, her face a mixture of disbelief, fury, and a dawning, horrified respect. Agent Thorn lowered his gun, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Kai's guitar fell silent, his fingers raw. The Highway Hypnos had been silenced. For now. but the static still hummed in my blood, a permanent echo of a song I would never truly escape. Hey, show me. I still fucking shake over. The silence that descended upon the Nomad's Nook in the aftermath of the Chrome Leak's violent dissolution was a fragile, brittle thing. It was punctuated by the ragged gasps of Agent Thorne, the shaky sigh from Kai as he lowered his guitar, and the distant, receding howl of the desert wind, now sounding almost mundane in comparison to the cosmic symphony of terror we had just endured. The overpowering scent of burnt sugar and ozone slowly began to dissipate, leaving behind the familiar earthy aroma of dust and stale beer. The garage was a wreck. The main breaker box sparked fitfully before finally dying with a sputtering groan, plunging us into a deeper gloom, relieved only by the emergency exit lights and the faint pre-dawn glow seeping in from the newly returned highway. The salt circle in Bay 1 was a scattered mess, the bay itself empty, save for a faint, oily residue on the concrete and that lingering, unsettling sweetness. Zera Moon stood amidst the debris of her shattered device, her shoulders slumped, the unholy light in her eyes extinguished, replaced by a profound, almost desolate weariness. Keeper of the frequencies, the conductor of the pass, looked an awful lot like a very tired, very defeated young woman. You broke it, she whispered, her voice hoarse, not with anger, but with a strange, hollow awe. The signal, the prime resonance, I've never seen. Never felt it shatter like that. It was feedback, I said, my own voice raspy, the crowbar still heavy in my hand. You tried to use the Nook to amplify it, to amplify me. I just overloaded the amplifier, created enough noise to drown out the signal. My explanation sounded ludicrously simple, given the interdimensional chaos we just faced, but in essence that's what it had been. A desperate, brutal act of sonic sabotage. Agent Thorne, slowly recovering his composure, and picked up his fallen radio. Silas to command. Situation contained at primary locus. Requesting immediate evac and specialized cleanup. Extreme contamination. And other anomalies. He glanced at Sierra, then at me. His expression a mixture of suspicion, bewilderment, and a grudging respect. Riley, Moon, you two aren't going anywhere until I get some straight answers. And they better be answers my superiors can actually file. But the fight seemed to have gone out of Sierra. She sank onto an overturned crate, her silver-black hair clinging to her pale face. There are no answers your superiors will understand, Agent, she said tiredly. Some highways, they don't lead to places on your maps, and some tolls, they weren't paid in money. Kai, ever the observer, began to quietly pack his guitar. The song's over for tonight, I reckon, he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. But the road always has another verse. As the true dawn broke, casting long, eerie shadows across the desert landscape, the first official vehicles began to arrive. Black, unmarked SUVs, their windows tinted, their occupants exuding an air of quiet, menacing efficiency. They weren't local cops. Thorne's specialized cleanup crew. They swept through the Nomad's Nook with practiced impersonal skill, taking readings, collecting samples, their faces impassive. They questioned Sarah and me separately, their inquiries precise, probing, yet carefully avoiding any terminology that would sound too unbelievable in a formal report. They were interested in frequencies, in impulses, in unexplained energy events. They seemed almost prepared for this kind of anomaly. Sierra, to my surprise, cooperated, though her answers were veiled in allegory and enigmatic pronouncements about ancient pathways, and the sacred duty of the listeners. They took her away, not in handcuffs, but with a strange, almost respectful deference, as if she were less a prisoner and more a rare specimen to be studied. Thorn approached me as I watched her go. "Riley," he said, his voice flat. "Riley," he said, his voice flat. "Your Phoenix Project file has been reactivated and amended. It seems your particular sensitivities might still be of use, or perhaps you're just too dangerous to let wander." He didn't elaborate. It wasn't an offer, and it wasn't quite a threat. It was a statement of a new unwelcome reality. The Nook itself was declared a site of geophysical instability and cordoned off. Kai Albescu, with a final enigmatic nod to me, had slipped away sometime before the official cleanup crew arrived, vanishing back into the desert as silently as he'd appeared. Another ghost of the highway. I was escorted into one of the black SUVs. As we drove away, leaving the Nomad's Nook to its silence and its secrets, I saw the faint shimmer of a salt circle, still visible on the tarmac of Bay 1. A fragile, temporary ward against the things that still roam the phantom shifts of the phantom shifts. Midnight Pass. The static in my blood hummed a low, persistent tune. The silence of the ordinary world now felt deafeningly loud. Several months passed, or perhaps they were years. Time had a way of warping in the sterile, windowless facilities where Agent Thorne's superiors had decided to debrief and evaluate me. The Phoenix Project, it turned out, hadn't been entirely shut down. It had merely mutated, gone deeper underground, its focus shifting from overt sonic weaponry to the more subtle, terrifying potential of manipulating, well, the kinds of frequencies I'd encountered at the Nomad's Nook. My first-hand experience, my unusual resilience and intuitive grasp of disruptive harmonics, as one white-coated analyst put it, made me an asset, or a guinea pig. The distinction was often blurry. They couldn't replicate what happened at the Nook. They couldn't summon the chrome lick or make the highway vanish. But they tried. Oh, they tried. They subjected me to endless simulations, a cacophony of controlled static and precisely calibrated frequencies, hoping to trigger something, hoping to understand the key that Siren had believed me to be. Mostly, they just gave me migraines and resurrected old nightmares. Zera, I learned through carefully filtered snippets of information, was being studied elsewhere, in a facility even more secure, even more clandestine than mine. She wasn't a prisoner, Thorne had once let slip, but a consultant, her ancient knowledge of liminal pathways proving intriguing. The government, it seemed, had stumbled upon a door they never knew existed, and Siren, for all her cosmic pronouncements, was perhaps one of the few who knew how to navigate what lay beyond. One day, Thorne, now a more senior, more haunted-looking Agent Thorne, came to my evaluation suite. He placed a small, sealed evidence bag on the table. Inside was the tiny, intricately crafted silver star I'd found on the floor of the Nook after the highway had returned from the void. "Our metallurgists are baffled," he said, his voice flat. "The isotopic signature is not of this Earth. Not of this dimension, perhaps. Something from the Star-Strewn Detour, as your musician friend called it." He paused. "We're reassigning you, Riley. Fieldwork. There are other Nooks out there. Other frequencies that need monitoring, or perhaps containment." And so I found myself back on the open road. Not as a fugitive this time, but as something else. A reluctant sentinel. A human tuning fork for the whispers between worlds. My new partners were tight-lipped, professional. Their equipment far more sophisticated than anything at the Nook, but their eyes held the same bewildered fear I had seen in Thorne's that night. The nightmares never truly left. The static hums a constant undercurrent. And sometimes when I'm driving alone on a desolate stretch of highway, late at night, the radio will crackle, and I'll hear a faint metallic voice whisper my name. I don't try to tune it out anymore. I listen. One evening, parked at a dusty, deserted crossroads in the Nevada Triangle, a place notorious for disappearances and strange lights, my satellite phone, a special encrypted model, buzzed. It was an audio file, no sender ID. I hesitated, then played it. It was Kai Albescu's voice and his guitar, a new song. The melody was haunting, familiar, full of dissonant chords and unresolved yearning. The lyrics spoke of a phantom shift saloon, of heartbeats and headlights, of highways that led to stars, and of a wrench who broke the symphony with static. But there was a new verse, one I hadn't heard before. The lich may sleep, the moon may wane, but the void still hums an old refrain. New keepers rise, new signals call, and the open road awaits us all. So we'll listen close to the desert's sigh, for the highway hypnos will not die. As the last chord faded, my dashboard lights flickered, just once, in that familiar, rhythmic thump, thump, thump out on the dark, empty highway before me. A single distant street lamp, where no street lamp should be, winked into existence, its light a lonely beckoning flicker in the vast, star-strewn emptiness. The road was calling, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that my shift was far from over. The Nomad's Nook was just the first stop on a highway with no end in sight. You've heard the whispers. You felt the chill of the star-strewn detour. The Nomad's Nook. It sinks its teeth into you, doesn't it? Jax Riley thought he found a refuge, but he just opened a door to something far more terrifying. This is just the beginning of his journey down a highway with no end. And let me tell you, the static is only getting louder. If you thought you knew where this was going, I promise you, the twists in the chapters to come will leave you breathless and questioning everything. What do you think Siren truly is? What is the Highway Hypnos? Share your theories in the comments below. And if you're still here, if you've survived this first taste of the Nook's darkness, then you're one of us now. Don't turn back. Subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules, because the road ahead is long, and it's paved with pure, unadulterated horror. Until our next pit stop, try to get some sleep.